Alpaca from the Stitchery. I'm here for part 3 of the April Alpaca showcase. So we've already dyed some yarn, we've spun some yarn, now we're going to weave some scarves out of the yarns that we have created and or gathered so that we can just see how the different textures of alpaca yarns affect woven fabric. And then of course the fourth part will be crochet. We'll get to that soon. But this week I'm gonna be doing some weaving. So I actually have 2 projects that I want to do, because I know for the mohair one I only did 1 project, but I really want to do 2 this time. So this is a alpaca sock yarn that I picked up in my Vermont trip, so I'll link to that above so you can see more about that. Now try and remember what the exact fiber content for this was. 1 second. Here we go. 20% alpaca, 65% superwash wool, 15% nylon. So it's only 20% alpaca. I'm hoping that that will be fine for the warp. Now I know with the mohair one I ended up not using as warp. However, when I was winding this into a ball, it didn't really seem as fluffy as the mohair one. So I am going to attempt it. And yeah, I mean, I really bought this specifically to be a warp, so I don't want to have to try to find a different use for it. So this will be one of the 2 scarves, and then the other one, let's see if I can grab this. I have, I'm not gonna grip on it. All right, so this is the merino tencel that I dyed, and this is a little bit of merino silk left from another project. This, in this order, should be enough to warp up the loom. So for this project, I want to use the alpaca blend striped yarn that I spun from one of the Paradise Fiber boxes. I always say boxes, it's a package, it's not a box. So I'll link to that as well. And then for the alpaca blend sock warp, I have all sorts of different alpaca yarns for us to use as stripes, just to see how the different textures affect being woven. So that is about it. I'm gonna do this one first because it's a little simpler. So I'm gonna go get this warped up and I will be right back. So my scarves for the alpaca weaving portion are done, and I have the mohair one out for me to compare it for you so you can see it. So we're going to start with this one just because it's the simplest. I don't have to worry about too much explanation of this one. So this is just the alpaca merino blend of yarn for the weft, and then for the warp it's merino tencel, merino silk, more merino tencel, and then merino bamboo. So this one, I really like how it has sort of a plaid reminiscent look in parts, just from the way the colors lined up. And I love the texture that the merino alpaca hand spun yarn gave it. I still have to wash it, so it's probably going to tighten up some, but I do really like how it came out. So there's that one, and set that aside. Now this one is the one where I was constantly changing yarns so that I could try all the different textures of alpaca yarn I had on hand. And for the warp, I use an alpaca blend sock yarn. And I'll put the fiber content for that below. I don't remember off the top of my head what it was. So let's unroll this. First one is pure baby alpaca. It's super soft. It was a sport weight, so it's relatively fine. Feels like it'll be pretty drapey in that part. Next part is 2 strands of Surrey lace. So that's quite a bit like the mohair lace. Let's see, where's that portion on the mohair one? Here it is. So here's 2 strands of the mohair lace, and that ended up being thinner than the alpaca lace. I would say it's maybe a touch softer, not by much. Also, the alpaca lace is pure alpaca, while the mohair lace is mohair silk. So then we got I think it was Knit Picks Reverie, which is baby alpaca and a little bit of acrylic. I don't really like that it has acrylic in it, but it did take dye really nicely, and I love how it wove up. I might weave the rest of that. So again, very soft, feels like it's gonna have some drape. Then we have the alpaca boucle. Can you see those little boucle bits? And that compares to the mohair boucle. Hopefully you can see that. So the difference between the mohair boucle and the alpaca boucle is the alpaca boucle is quite a bit softer, but also the loops don't have as much strength to them. So I feel like these are going to get fuzzy looking and less distinct more quickly. So if you're trying to make outerwear and you want the loops to stay more distinct, you'd probably want to go with mohair. If it's going to touch your skin and you want it to be soft, I would go with the alpaca. I think at that point they started repeating. I used the last of the alpaca merino blend hand spun, and the last of the warp yarn I used for a section. I really like this texture. I kind of want to buy more of this and weave with it just like this because it's so cool. It's a great texture to it. All right, so that's about it. It's not a super long sampler, thankfully. I mean, they take a very long time to weave when they're very long, obviously. So that finishes up the weaving portion of the alpaca series. The last piece will be crochet. I will have that out for you next week, so you can look forward to that. And thank you so much for watching so far. I've really enjoyed making this. See you soon.